Recording, I believe that's on now. Okay, the
Yeah.
problem you gave me said we want to solve for R2. And in order to get that, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you a completely different problem, mainly because these numbers are a big mess here. And it'll hopefully make a little more sense if we pick some easier numbers to work with. So I'm going to call this A equals, and then we're going to call this 1 over 1 over B plus 1 over C. So it's the same format, but this is going to be easier to follow along with it first, just because A and B and C is a lot better than R, and R with just different little subscripts. So in this problem over here, we want to solve for C.
Right.
So the first thing you want to do to kind of start to unlock this a little bit is I'll show you some side examples here along the way. So I'm just going to do a little bit of side work over here. So if I tell you this, if I said A over B equals C over D. So this is just a little side example. But if you have two different fractions and they're equal to each other, if you want to kind of get them together and unlock this, you can do something called cross multiplying. In other words, I'd want to multiply A with D, B with C. So that's the same thing as saying AD equals BC. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that process unlocks it. You can only do that if it's a fraction equals to a fraction. So take that idea over here, and I want to make this a fraction equals a fraction. So you can't change anything in the problem, but instead of A, I'm just going to call it A over 1. It's the same thing. We didn't change anything to the problem, A or A over 1, but now I have two different fractions. So if I follow this idea right here and I take two fractions and I multiply them, this would give you, I'm going to multiply everything diagonally just like we did here. So A times D, or in terms of our actual problem, it's going to be A times 1 over B plus 1 over C is equal to 1 times 1, that's the B and the C, that gives me 1. So that's the cross multiply. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to get to C, so you always want to keep an eye on the letter you're trying to get to. So currently, A is being multiplied by this mess in the parentheses. So if I want to undo two things that are being multiplied, just kind of forget that it's a big mess. Just thing 1, thing 2. And I've got two things. We'll underline them in red. Thing 1, thing 2. And the two things are being multiplied. And if you want to undo the two things that are being multiplied, the opposite of multiply is going to be to divide. So I want to divide both sides by A. If I do that, it's going to get rid of it over here, and it's going to toss it underneath over there. Still good?
Yes.
So that would give me 1 over B plus 1 over C equals 1 over A. Okay?
Yeah.
Still keep an eye on what you're trying to get to. I'm trying to get to C. That means you want to get rid of everything around it. So the quickest thing I can get rid of is 1 over B. So these two things are being added. The opposite of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract this one over to here. It's going to get rid of it here. It's going to put it over here.
Got it.
It'll be 1 over C equals 1 over A minus 1 over B. Still good.
Yeah.
Okay, trying to get to C. It's stuck on the bottom. This kind of goes back to that principle of cross multiply, sort of. So all I'm doing though, see, it's not fraction equals fraction. So that rule doesn't hold anymore. But if I want to get rid of something over here, this is 1 divided by C. If I want to get rid of this and move this C on over to the right, I could do that by multiply. If I multiply the left by C, these would be gone. Agree?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you do that to the left, you also have to do that to the right. So this is going to get that whole thing is going to get multiplied by C.
So that'll end up being 1 equals that.
Oh yeah, let's clean it up now so you can see it. So now it's 1 equals. Now, whether you put the C at the end or if you want to put the C in the front of it, doesn't matter. It's just C times the stuff in parentheses. 1 over A minus 1 over B. So the big part of this is just not getting carried away with the stuff in parentheses, even though it's messy. Just think of this as C times stuff. So if I want to get rid of the stuff, C times the stuff, to undo times, you would divide, right?
Right.
So C times the stuff, if I want to get rid of it, I'm going to divide both sides
By the
by
stuff.
the stuff. So that's going to give you 1 over the stuff is equal to C, right?
Yeah.
Which is 1 over A minus 1 over B. And there's your answer. That's what you were looking for. Okay. Now, we got to start over, but it's going to be the same exact process. This just makes it a little bit easier to wrap your head around it the first time you see it, because A and B and C are a little bit easier to follow along with than RT, R1, R2. They all look too similar to kind of see where the moving pieces went, right? So
yeah. Okay.
I'm going to switch to paper and we'll do it again. And let's start over. And now it's, let me do one more. That marker kind of went through the paper. All right, so your problem, make sure I got this right. It was RT equals 1 over 1 over, read this to me because I don't have it in front of me. What is it? R what?
R1, 1 over plus 1 over R2.
Okay. So this is the same thing we just did a second ago, except we called it A and B and C. And in our problem a second ago, we said that we wanted to solve for C. So now in my problem, I want to solve for R2. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So we're going to run the same process. And I said a second ago, if I make this a fraction equal to a fraction, we can cross multiply. So I'm just going to call this RT over 1. So now I've got 2 fractions. So I'm going to cross multiply. So that would be RT times the stuff. That would give you RT times the stuff is equal to 1. So take a second and write the stuff in, but it's 1 over R1 plus 1 over R2. Okay. All right. So I'm trying to get to R2. So just like previously, we kept an eye on C at all times. Now I'm going to keep an eye on R2 at all times. So these two things are being multiplied. To undo multiplication, you divide. So this would be 1 over R1 plus 1 over R2 equals 1 over RT. We divided both sides by RT.
Right.
Okay, so still keeping an eye on R2. That's what I want to solve for. These two things are being added. To undo addition, I'm going to subtract. So this is 1 over R2 equals 1 over RT minus 1 over R1. Still trying to solve for RT. 1 over R2, they're being divided. The opposite of dividing, if I want to get this thing onto the other side, is to multiply. So if I multiply that whole side by R2, those would cancel out. But if I multiply the left by R2, I've got to multiply the right by R2. Okay, so these do that. On this side, let's write it again now to kind of clean it up. That's 1 equals R2 times 1 over RT minus 1 over R1. Remember, we're solving for R2. So now you have R2 times stuff in parentheses. If I want to undo times, I would divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by the stuff. That would give me, slide the paper up a little bit here. That would give me 1 over the stuff, 1 over RT minus 1 over R1 is equal to R2. And that is what you are looking for. Cool.
Got it.
All right, hold on 1 second.